Hey, it's Jared with Coda. In this series of videos, we're going to be building out the landing page for Coda. We're going to be building a Gatsby site using Sanity as a headless CMS, and this is just the design that we're going to be working towards here in Figma, just to give you a preview of where we're headed. We can open up the code editor and see that we have just a studio and a web directory. This is a common convention that I've seen a lot of people using when using a Gatsby front end with a Sanity backend. So in the web directory, this is the Gatsby site. We really only have a couple quick dependencies installed. I like to start with a really bare bones Gatsby site. Typically people start with the Gatsby starter default is sort of what just happens when you create a new Gatsby site, but you really only need a few dependencies, and I think in most cases I spend more time clearing out the boilerplate that the default starter gives you. So I just like to install the base dependencies that we need for a Gatsby site. And you can actually see, I've got it pulled up off screen, so I'll pull this over. You can actually see this is already live and deploying on Netlify. That's just sort of a silly little, I wanted to buy the domain on Netlify to make it easy, so I needed something to deploy, whatever. But you really only need these few things. So I like to start that way, and then all you need is a pages directory with an index file, and you have a website. And so starting with that in the web directory and then moving over to the studio, this is, again, just as bare bones as it comes. I don't use any starter files or anything like that from Sanity. I just set up the empty data sets, and it starts with, you can see here, there's no schema. There's no data types or anything like that. So we're going to build all of that out from scratch over the series of the next several videos. But yeah, that's just sort of a quick look into kind of what I have so far. In fact, I can pull up the empty schema. Here's the studio, nothing in it. It's already deployed and up and all of that fun stuff. Again, just kind of got the boilerplate of the project set up. All of that is just straight in the documentation that I'll link below, both from Sanity and for Gatsby to get up and running. So yeah, so I think in this video, what I probably want to do is go over that quick tour and then walk through connecting the studio to Gatsby. That's kind of the first step in building this page out. With a page like this, I would usually actually just scaffold it out and static file, right? Like I wouldn't actually connect it to a CMS. But ultimately, the long-term goal is that this will become a pretty big website with a lot of different resources and information. So just connecting it to Sanity from day one is important for me. So again, we've got everything set up and ready to go. So I think the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to cd into our studio, and we're going to run sanity start and get that fired up. And then we'll open up another window where we'll come into Coda Camp and then into our web directory, and we will run Gatsby develop. And so that should be just about done over here. There we go. Again, here's our live kind of published instance. I'll go ahead and close that out, and I'll close this as well. And we just have it localhost 3333. We have our empty disk. And then right on cue, this should be done. And we have hello world. So the first thing that I want to do is come in, and I'm just going to make kind of a dummy, a really quick schema file, I guess, just to get some data into Gatsby. We'll come back in the next couple of videos and create our actual content types. But to start, I just want a little something that we can pull in. So I'm just going to do like, I don't know, fast fact, whatever. And so all of these schema files are going to be default exports. And so we'll just give it a title of, we'll say fast fact. And so the title field is going to be the title of the document in Sanity. This is sort of the display name for the UI. The name field, whoops, if I can type, the name field is the actual data name, if that makes sense. So when we're hitting the API or performing queries, it's going to be on this name field. And then we have to give it a type, and this is just going to be of document. Again, probably wouldn't actually want to make this a document, but just for demonstration's sake, so we can get something running in Gatsby, feels fine. And then inside of here, we'll give it some fields. Fields is always going to be an array of objects. And inside of that object, we will give it a title of fact and perhaps a name of fact, and a type will be, make it a string. Makes sense to me. Give it a quick format, save that, and then over here in our schema file, let's just delete these comments. Actually, I don't really want any of those around. They're just kind of in my way. So what we can do after we have these sort of default create schema and schema types from Sanity, these kind of come even with an empty data set. You're going to get these out of the box. So then all we need to do is import, I think we called it fast fact from fast fact. And then over here, we will add into this concatenation our fast fact data type, and we save that, head back over, it's going to rebuild the bundle, and bam, we have fast facts. And so right now there's no documents found, but you can see it's all being registered. Again, this is our title field that you can see. You know, you could kind of maybe do some things. I don't know, in terms of naming conventions, people are particular, and I typically am too, but you could see, you know, if we just renamed this to facts, plural, it gets changed there as well. So then you could come in, add a document. Here's the fact and the actual text input. And if we were to maybe put these side by side to show, you can see that over here where we have our fact, we're getting that in here. And then ultimately, this is going to be a field on the fast fact itself, which is just a very logical hierarchy of, hey, we call it fact, we get fact, so on and so forth. I am a fact. And then we can publish that, and we are good to go. One cool thing is you can publish content while you're developing locally, and those things will pull up. I'm like 90% sure, actually, as I say that. So where it's this at? This is the codecamp.sanity studio. I'm pretty sure we don't have to deploy. No, I'm a liar. We do have to deploy it. We have to deploy it because obviously the live instance doesn't even know about these fields. But I think when you publish content, it does push. I'll have to, don't take my word for that. So that's really all we have to do to get a content type into Sanity. And we now have a fact that we'll be able to see once we deploy that up. And so on that note, if we want to pull this into Gatsby, and this is going to fuss at us because we disconnected, so let me close that down. We can, first of all, let's add that, and then we will commit that, and we will just say add fast fact. Awesome. And then we can run Sanity Deploy. And what this is going to do is it's going to put together our schema updates, and it's going to deploy them out. And the Sanity docs are awesome. So if you look into their CLI stuff that I'll link down in the description, there's some really interesting and fast things that you can do with their CLI, including data imports and exports. And I've used those quite a lot recently, actually, just using Sanity to sort of piecemeal little APIs for side projects and websites at work and things like that. But once this is all deployed out, sweet, we'll clear that out. And then we can run Sanity GraphQL deploy. And then this will be quite a bit faster. We will enable that. I typically don't once it's actually in production, but during development, everything's fine and dandy. So now that we're in here, you can see now this is deployed up and it's all in here. So we have I am a fact. Let's go ahead and we will throw in a new one and say I am your second fact. And then once we publish that, when we come back over to our GraphQL playground, this should be updated to be able to say, yeah, there we go, all fast fact. And so when you query on this, this is going to return all of our fast facts. And so if we wanted to just look at that real quick, all fast fact, and return the facts. And here you go. And so now that we have this GraphQL deployed, we're able to connect this using a Gatsby plugin that's just going to infer a Gatsby schema based off of our GraphQL schema from Sanity. And so to do that, now that we have this running, everything's fine. I think we're done with Sanity for now, so we'll close that out. But if we come over here, we're going to need to install a couple of things. And so the first one of those is going to be Gatsby Source-Sanity. So we'll npm install Gatsby Source-Sanity. And the second one that we're going to install is a package called .env. And you may be familiar with it, but this allows us to use environment variables in our code. And so we are going to do that for an API key for Sanity. And you can have a default production data set from Sanity that's public. It's a good idea to lock it down. So just from the get-go, we're going to have that set up. And so we'll install those and I'll let that run. Awesome. And once those are installed, we'll head back over to our code. We can close out of this studio. We'll bring this back. And then we can head into our web directory. And we're going to need a Gatsby config now that we do have plugins. And so we will just create, and these are things that, you know, if you did use the Gatsby starter default, you would get out of the box with Gatsby. But again, it just doesn't feel like a big deal to create the file when I actually need it. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to require our .env package. And from that, we want the config. And that's going to reference a .env file that we have not created yet. And then we are also going to add a module.exports. And we are going to export an object containing an array of plugins. And in that array of plugins, we will have an object where we will resolve Gatsby plugin, Gatsby source sanity. So the options that we're going to pass it are going to be the project ID, and that is in our case going to be, let me just pull that in. And this will be unique to you, obviously. This is something that you'll have from your Sanity instance, and you can reference their docs on how to get that. It's very simple. And then we will have a data set, and we will be referencing the production data set. And then we will need a token. And now this is where this .env comes in handy. And so what we're going to reference is actually a process.env.sanity token is what we're going to call that. And so we haven't created that yet. What we're going to do is I'll create a .env.example file. And in that, we're going to have something like this is going to be the sanity token. And then it's going to be just a whole bunch of stuff. And so this is the name that we want to give it just because that's what we referenced. But this token will be pulled from the Sanity manage settings for your studio. And again, their docs have a lot of information on how you get that. I don't know that I need to sit and show you that. So we will create a new file called the .env where we will add this sanity token. And then I will run this off screen and drop in my actual sanity token. Cool beans. Should be good. And now we have that being pulled in. So we have this installed. We are referencing it from this environment variable. Again, here's the example. You'll replace this with your own, and you'll name it like this as .env, referenced here, and you should be good to go. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and just run Gatsby develop. And so as this runs, you can see all of this, which means our plugin is working, right? So Sanity fetching the remote GraphQL schema, transforming it to a GraphQL SDL, stitching the schemas. These are all really helpful things, actually, and you can do some further digging into that process. And I do think that it's helpful because sometimes when there are problems, understanding the steps of a Gatsby build or of these plugins can be really helpful. And so it looks like everything went okay. So everything still works. And we can see that we now have access to a handful of things from Sanity. So that means that the plugin worked and we're connected. And when you see this fast fact, this is the data type that we created and published in Sanity and found. So that's awesome. That means that not only is the plugin working, but that the data is pulling in as well. So we can build this query out to look for the edges, the node, and then the fact. And so if we go ahead and run that, you can see that we have our facts from Sanity successfully pulling into Gatsby. So in the next video, we're going to walk through maybe adding a couple of actual content types and kind of how that modeling works in Sanity and how to kind of reason about maybe your different schema types and things like that. And then we'll continue getting them pulled into GraphQL, and then we will start on the front end after that.